La taula la moderarà el professor Jordi Martín. Ell és professor al Departament de Geografia de la UB i membre del grup de recerca Antàrtic, Àrtic and Alpine Environments. Ell investiga els discursos i l'evolució de la consciència ambiental al llarg de les darreres dècades i la seva principal contribució ha estat l'anàlisi de l'impacte que l'actual percepció ambiental, centrada particularment en el canvi climàtic, està tenint en la manera d'interpretar aquesta mateixa crisi. Entre altres publicacions, ha estat coeditor del llibre Canvi global, crisi ecosocial i perspectives futures, que també recomanem la seva lectura d'Edicions UB. Dit això, comencem la taula rodona, si em permeteu.
Sí, gràcies, Itziar. Good morning, colleagues, and thank you for joining us today. This conference focuses on how we can develop sustainable pathways. We do so in a context marked by decades of environmental concern and efforts to promote sustainable development. And yet, progress remains far from sufficient, as repeatedly noted also by major international organizations, not only by scientists. This roundtable aims to explore further how socio-environmental sustainability can be advanced. It's one of the greatest challenges that humanity faces today. I'm sure that we are all aware about that. I will ask each speaker one question and then one cross-cutting question to all three of them before opening basically the floor to all of you. I will start with you, Pep. You have shown us that 35 countries have already began to decouple fossil emissions from economic growth for at least 1 decade, and that all new electricity demand was met with renewable energy last year. For a long time, this decoupling has largely been explained by the offshoring of emissions to other countries. What measures should we prioritize going forward to turn this slowdown into a sustained and absolute reduction? Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks. So that's correct, particularly when China became part of the World Trade Organization and people start offshoring very, very quickly the manufacturing of all sorts of products we consume and still now. That became a huge deal. That's the early 2000s. At this point, what we're looking at is that there is a decline in the intensity of the carbon density of producing GDP, worldwide. So this is no longer about Switzerland sending everything to China or elsewhere because they don't produce anything and they have a clean profile. So I think that it remains a characteristic of our society where we look for also places for production that they're cheaper, and therefore we consume a lot of products for which we're not responsible for their emissions. But again, remember that the biggest decarbonization in the world is taking place in the very China where we're consuming a lot of their products. So this is no longer what it was, 20 years ago, where China almost exclusively from growth in coal-based electricity was supplying products to the world. China has become, the single fastest and by volume many times over any, the second most growth in renewable energy elsewhere in the world. Focusing on green industries and production of green electricity as well. There's a long way to go, and they have committed to not to fully decarbonize until 2060. But we saw last year for the first time what could be again almost a peak, a stabilization of the growth. Actually, no, almost a full stop of the growth, and specifically on the production of electricity, a decline of fossil fuel emissions from electricity production. So these are quite remarkable turning points in the global effort to decarbonize. And I think that the issue you point out has become less relevant now that so many of the countries, including some of the producing countries, are also decarbonizing. Nevertheless, you're always going to have Switzerland, which has a very clean profile because they're not manufacturing anything. and of course, to some different levels, many other countries around the world.
Great. Would you suggest any specific measure that turns this likely plateau that you mentioned into a rapid, or to create the appropriate conditions for a rapid decarbonization, as you suggested, that it's what is necessary, considering basically that the amount of CO2s will remain so in our planet for many, many years? Specific measures you mentioned, for instance, the case and the tendency basically of Australia. Any suggestion to focus on specific measures?
So we often say there's no silver bullet, to solve any problem, but in climate space there is one, which is what makes this thing quite remarkably unique, and that is what you heard from me and from others. Electrification of as much of our economy as we can. We know that the mobility, all the transport can be electrified. There'll be very few things that will not be electrified. You just go to China, it's like 40-50% of the cars stock in the cities is already electric. There was like 250, there's a 250,000 light trucks, los camiones, that they were sold last year. There's 20% of all the heavy duty trucks which are being sold now exclusively electric. You go there and every single cement mixer is electric. So we know that the path of electrification for transport, it is really the one that is winning. 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, we're still discussing should be hydrogen, should be biofuels, should be electric. We know now what the path is. The other thing is that there's a lot of industry that can be electrified as well. Everything that is low heat to 100 to 100 degrees, which is the majority of industry, can actually be electrified. This kind of heating can be electrified. We have other issues when you go to 800 and 1,000 degrees for a steel, iron ore. These are big mining industry type and metallurgical industry, which we need other solutions as well. Even then, there's some electric solutions. So anyway, just to kind of re-emphasize the fact that, and I think that, Albert also said this thing, the fact that, the whole household can go, fully electric. Of course, many flats are already fully electric, but if you go around the world, we still have a lot of gas for the heating of the house. We still have gas for the heating of the water. All these things now, we have better appliances, more efficient appliances like heat pumps to produce hot water for households and small industry, with heat pumps, which are 2 to 3 to 4 times more efficient than the normal old-fashioned heater. So we do have all the technology. It's just that the technology needs to be produced at a scale, as we see being produced in some parts of the world, that are fully competitive, which they are not yet, with the traditional machines to do the same type of work. But this thing is changing very quickly. So again, electrification of as much as we can of our society, our economy, it's really, that single bullet, which of course it has different shades and forms depending where you are in the industry, in the transport, in the heavy transport. But it all relies on continue developing something we know very well how to do, which is a bigger electric grid based on renewable energy. And as we heard before, really pushing hard on the storage place. Batteries fell 45%, the cost of batteries fell 45% last year globally. And it was declining, 20 to 30% the previous decade. So this is a free fall on cost, the same way we saw solar panels, declining their cost to a prices now that, Australians are putting solar panels on the roof, not because they want to save the world, it's just because make the electricity cheaper for them. That's why it's successful. And that's the way ultimately we'll succeed in this major transformation we need to do.
Great.
I'll stop here for now.
Thank you so much. As much as electrification as we can and as it is possible, and focusing on that part that it's not possible, Albert, I fully agree that it's important to develop a new paradigm. Considering the level of maturity of hydrogen, how useful can be for global decarbonization, and to what extent it'll only make sense if it comes with a significant reduction in energy demand, global scale, and in combination of.
I can put several hats in my head, because maybe just to put on the table some controversy with Pep.
Em sembla que està obert, eh? Acosta't, Alça.
Now?
Està obert, eh?
No? It was open before, and now it's fine. So, as I said before, I can put several hats on my head, and maybe to generate some controversy with Pep, I could say that I agree with the electrification, but there are different ways from my point of view, and also answering your question. So, on one side we have China. They decided to go for batteries and for electrical cars, for instance. I agree that transportation is one of the most difficult sectors to decarbonize. So they decided to go for it, but maybe they decided to go for it because they have the resources, and they control nowadays the value chain. It was a strategy. It was a decision. At a certain moment, Xi Jinping said, "We don't have oil, so we will go for batteries." He said that publicly. That was a decision. And then now US is taking a different decision. They said, "Okay, we don't have the batteries, but we have oil, so we are going to base our economy on oil." This was another decision. But then it's the European Union in the middle of these two ways. And my question is if there is a third way, because hydrogen is also an electrification. Because at the end, it's about converting electricity into something that you can put in your car to run it. So it's somehow electrification. Of course, then it's about efficiency in the conversion, and I agree. And it's also about maturity. But I think that there is wrong hypothesis in your question, is assuming that batteries are mature. Batteries is not a mature technology at all. Maybe it's cheap now, but it's not mature. So I think that it's very interesting to put everything in context, because again, it's not about technicalities. It's not about science or technology. It's also about economy. It's also about resources. There are many things we have to think about when taking decisions, strategical decisions. So from the technical point of view, yes, answering directly your question, there are solutions and mature enough solutions to scale up hydrogen technologies. But of course, then you need to be brave enough to put the money on the upscaling, as the Chinese did with the batteries. That's exactly my point. I don't know if I'm answering. It looks like gallego, pero.
So for you, it's to try to sum up. The maturity is enough to scale up.
Yeah.
It's an issue of investment and going because we are living a new wave of hydrogen, let's say, optimism and research, and it's not a new phenomena, but it's been for a few decades.
Indeed, there are electrolyzers, for instance. I mean, there are two big things here: the electrolysis to generate hydrogen, and then the use of this hydrogen by fuel cells, for instance, converting again into movement or whatever electricity. So just to give some numbers, we have electrolyzers in the order of hundreds of megawatts already installed. And even the less mature technology that is solid oxide electrolysis cells, SOEC, that is the one I'm working in, we have already 5-6 megawatts installed. So it's not anymore something that we do in the lab. There are companies that are basing their business on this, big companies. So I think that the problem with the energy technologies is that we have to keep updated all the time. Because definitely our ideas become older very quickly, and become old very quickly. Also, we have to update about the nuclear. By the way, I didn't mention it too much, but nuclear is also an option that we should consider, of course. And but with the same problem is that nuclear is basically generating electricity, and then we have the same issue because we have to deal with electricity. The good point is that it's not intermittent. The bad point is that it's based on a finite source or a finite resource. So I think that we have to keep ourselves updated because things are evolving so quickly.
Thank you. And Maria Luisa, in recent years, we have seen a rise in climate denial as well as in eco-anxiety. With interdisciplinary collaboration in mind, what narrative can best contribute to turning concern into sustained public engagement and at the same time promoting values of well-being that are not based primarily on material consumption? I know that it's a broad question, but I think that it's necessary in the current debate.
Well, I think that the way Pep started his talk, that is showing that what we are doing really makes a difference, and that the carbon emissions are somehow working, not for it should, but there is a trend, and it is in a positive sense. So that the message, so that the people can not feel this eco-anxiety, is the feeling of control. Is the only way to control fear is through the sense of control. So the sense of control, based on evidence, is that two things. We know what can work, and we are already doing something on that side. So that narrative, a simple narrative in which people can understand that their choice of the way they heat their houses is not, because sustainability has long been in education for recycling, right? So if I separate things, I'm doing my part. But it's not that. The type of decisions that we do for the supplies that we choose for our house, the cars that we choose. Of course, we live in a world where there are lots of fake news, and even if they are not fake, there are not scientific consensus many times, as we've seen here. So it is difficult to do what it should be done in order to people know what to do. And that should be simple, buy electric. But if there is a scientist who says, well, maybe not electric, that makes people confused. And not because they are not able to understand, but because they are not motivated to think about it. And so if there is lots of confusion and lots of fear about it, people would not dig. So the thing is clear messages, if you want to see from the public's perspective, clear messages, and gaining social acceptance, which is also an issue when we are speaking about locating sites that are not particularly, nice to have in your neighborhood. But this social acceptances does not go with looking at their perspective as egoistical or don't, because of course it's not nice to have, an incinerator or a plant close to your house. And it's true that people should be compensated for that disturbance in their way of life. So I'm really for this compensation, not necessarily economic. It can be on public services, public spaces, good schools, and so on, but to recognize that those communities would be affected. And so social acceptance has also to do with listening to the needs of the communities and the risks they are taking on behalf of the all good. So my issue is that, yes, fear and listening to people's needs. The issue of consumption that you also brought here is a huge problem. That I don't know how to speak about it, but I understand that this world of consumption that has been, designed and idealized for everyone is a part of the resentment that the society, many parts of the society, the ones that have lower power of acquisition, and this resentment has turned into populism. And that is a huge problem that we have to face, because populism, let me put this in the table also, because populism is the consequence of this idealized consumption model that people cannot access. And so lots of people are now turning against science and against the ecological solutions. Look at the United States. And so many of the public policies that have been implemented and are implemented in Europe and are implemented in China in a completely anti-democratic way, I don't know if they can sustain in democratic countries with the rise of populism, which was based on this consumption society that many people are deprived of, because the inequalities have increased enormously.
Thank you. And the final question before so the public can ask you. It's very important how we frame problems. It's key, actually, for the understanding, interpretation, and also conducting subsequent policies. If we look at the evolution of environmental impacts globally since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, there is a clear tension between our development model and the availability of natural resources, as well as the ecological quality of ecosystems. How, at this stage, after 5 decades of environmental concern and 3 decades promoting sustainability, how should we frame sustainability today? Essentially, as doing the same things much more efficiently, or rather requiring changing our lifestyles?
I think
Yes, just to put the questions right.
it's the only. I think that the answer should be realistically. So we have to really think about sustainability in a realistic way, and go step by step. So for sure, I think it's about like in soccer, no? So it's next match. So next milestone. What is the next milestone? No, if we want to reach that, I mean, since the beginning, the ideal. So maybe it's going to be a problem from the social acceptance point of view, but it's also from the technical and economical point of view. It's also very risky, because at the end you are putting expectations on things that maybe are not completely developed yet. So I think that it's very important in this and other emerging fields or technologies to be realistic and then go step by step, milestone after milestone. That would be and explaining things properly. Because what you said, no, at the end is if you send us very simple message, which can be very efficient and feel people more comfortable or more, it's also somehow populism, as you said, no? Yeah. So then maybe sometimes we have to sophisticate a little bit more the message. I mean, maybe there is a trade-off between sophisticating too much and being clear enough, no? But I think that this realistic progress plus a simple but sophisticated enough message could be a nice combination. I don't know.
It's open to all of you, this question.
Yeah, I agree with realism and measurable goals that can we can derive evidence that can be put into simple messages.
And can be explained.
Explained and kind of monitorizing the processes. And that would be very important.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anything else, Pep?
So I'll say a couple of things. First of all, there's nothing about sustainable about feeding 8 billion people and perhaps 9 or 10 over the next few decades. No matter how we do it and how you let people be transported, 8 billion people, and how you let people have a little fun, 8 billion people. So I think what we're trying to do is to minimize the damage to the planet so that there's, we're not committing ourselves into, less well-being in the future. I think that from a technological point of view, there's huge opportunities. So I think there's two components. One is a social component and the other is a technological. We have more than ever before the technology to be able to minimize the impact. We will never stop the impact. It's impossible, which is so many people and we're still growing. So, but we can minimize it, and technology will play a huge role, and it can play a role as fast as hard we push that technology to deliver on this lower environmental impact. I think that at the same time, we have to have a social conversation about, it's our happiness based on, who owns more stuff or bigger stuff. And, that's something that it's a separate conversation, and I think that we have to have it. And, we do, from a global point of view, we are dealing with the fact that a lot of people, billions of people are moving into the middle class. And we have taught the middle class or aspirants to middle class that having more stuff, it's a good thing. And so, we can have a very mature conversation in Europe, but then you go in China and it's a different conversation. The parents of middle class Chinese today were parents which were, living out of poor agriculture, like 35 years ago or 40 or whatever, those parents are. And this is a very difficult conversation to have with them. The same way we're just getting, India out of the poverty, having electricity. I mean, this is just happening now. So, we know that consumption will increase, and we want to some extent, of course, consumption to increase in these parts of the world to support, well-being and everything that is needed. But I think that technology needs to play. And as I said, we can push technology really hard to deliver on those benefits to the environment and the efficiency. And that's a separate conversation from the social one.
If I can add, another conversation that we have to open is with the industry. Because at the end, of course, we can generate technology. We can even put the regulation on the table. But the industry is the one paying for these new developments. So we have to talk to them because, of course, all is about convincing them that the investment makes sense. And there is an opportunity there for the future. If you are not arriving the first, then it's going to be, it's not going to be cost effective, it's going to be more costly for you. So that's a conversation that it's also very important because they are one of the major players here in this field.
Thank you. Is there any, well, we could continue with your questions. I think that it's... Anem bé de temps, veritat? És que aquí no hem començat.
Okay, so I'm going to speak in English. So I have a question for the three opponents from today. So I thank you very much for your presentation. They have been very inspiring for me. And my question has to do with the future scenarios, because obviously all the data that you presented show us that we are going in the wrong direction. So we're still struggling to achieve this net zero target by 2015. So for example, Pep was saying that current policies are still, how they are going today, are going to take us to this increase in temperature to 2.5, 3 degrees Celsius, increase in in temperature. Albert was saying that we are still dependent like 80% on the fossil fuel. So, there is no good, good news of going very quickly in the right direction. And Luisa was also talking about these future scenarios that were made by people and putting the people in the center, but nevertheless, these scenarios are just staying in a drawer and not actually implemented. So, and I will go back to the issue raised by PEP that is not only about mitigation strategies or measures, but it's also about adaptation strategies. And I'm wondering what we are doing in this regard. No? So obviously we have a lot of scientific data that is showing us that in terms of mitigation, we are not doing enough. No, but then in terms of adaptation, we are still, I think, quite back behind, no? So quite a lot behind. I'm wondering also because this conference is very much about interdisciplinarity, and we have this occasion to bring together like results from different disciplines, but nevertheless, like all the results are very much disciplinary oriented, you know? So I'm thinking everything Albert or Pep were actually showing us. So the human component is still missing there, and probably what Luisa was showing us is not taking into account all this scientific data, no? So my question, sorry no, for rambling around, but my question would be, what we can do in terms of adaptation, because obviously in terms of mitigation, we are not going to achieve these goals that we have for 2050. What is the role of interdisciplinarity in these adaptation strategies that we should actually develop and put on the table? No? Thank you very much.
We'll go for it. So, yeah, I think it's a very difficult question. I can give you some things that, from the technical point of view, have been done to try to adapt or to be more resilient, if you want. No? That would be maybe the word that is nowadays on the newspapers. No? What we have done, buying more natural gas, just in case. Signing new agreements with other countries that can provide us with fossil fuels. What we have done also after the blackout here in Spain, for instance, is trying to create a new regulation in order to make our grid network more resilient. Some companies and some countries are promoting CO2 capture and then are promoting policies to put it under the carpet. So these are, unfortunately, the type of things we are doing in terms of adaptation or resiliency from the technical point of view in my specific field. I think that by definition, adaptation means a quick solution, something you can implement quickly. And in energy, energy is a very is a market or a field that would be very high inertia. So you cannot implement anything for tomorrow. It's extremely complicated. So you need to go step by step. And now that we had some issues, big problems, unexpected or suddenly coming problems, then we had to take decisions that are the few ones we can implement quickly. And the ones I am telling you are the ones that we can implement quickly. In the long term, maybe self-consumption, and in this sense, Catalonia is pioneering this type of approach. Self-consumption is one of the maybe major actions in terms of resiliency.
I don't know. We, in terms of adaptation, we adapt We have been doing this for a million years. So we are very adaptable. Sometimes our adaptation strategies are not very positive because we adapt to this consumption society and we adapt to the legislations. We make our houses more efficient. But of course, the issue finally is in terms of changing human behavior, not by law, not by forcing to change the energy efficiency of the walls it was what Pep said, it was you have to make it cheaper because that is one important criteria. Because if you go for other strategies that are more costly, you have to then make people understand that they are part of the crew, as she said in the beginning. That is to think of the old planet as we are being in the same ship. And that is extremely complicated to activate that identity, that global identity that we are one member of this enormous crew. Because everything would say in your real life, in your day-to-day life, that you are from a company, a family, a neighborhood, and that is the identities that are salient on your daily basis, and these are the ones that make you decide to buy or not to buy an electric car because you want to that your neighbor would see your car as bigger than his or whatever. So it is not your identity as a human being that has to adapt for better planet, but is your identity as a neighbor or a person that wants to show off on the other. So in the end, it's the identity that, so the adaptation, yes, we adapt, but sometimes not in the right way because there are lots of pressures for your decisions, and there's decisions multiplied by many thousands of million people make catastrophic decisions. So the issue is how do you make this identity salient in your daily life? And that is very, very, very difficult.
So one last question from the public. We'll try to keep it short. Thank you.
No, just one more thing. This creating this world which is every day more individual with the mobile phone, the personalized messages, the smaller bubble in which we live makes it every day more difficult to think yourself as connected to the world.
Bueno, un comentario en español, si se me permite. Hemos visto que conecta, yo creo, mi cuestión o mi comentario, la primera y la tercera exposición, sobre todo. En la primera hemos visto estos gráficos de países ricos en los cuales aumentaba el Producto Interior Bruto y al mismo tiempo disminuía las emisiones de gases invernadero, lo cual obviamente es una buena noticia, pero yo creo que especialmente en una jornada de imaginar futuros diferentes y romper un poco con las visiones de lo que es la buena vida, es particularmente importante destacar, yo creo, que tendríamos que abandonar totalmente el Producto Interior Bruto como indicador de si las cosas van bien, social o económicamente. Y más cuando hay demostrados en muchos estudios que al menos en los países ricos ya tenemos, como los que salían en el gráfico, hay muy nula correlación, de hecho, entre esperanza de vida y PIB per cápita, entre grado de satisfacción, que, por ejemplo, conectan mucho más, según los estudios sociales, con el nivel de desigualdad de una sociedad. El nivel de desigualdad de una sociedad creo que conecta más con muchos indicadores positivos de salud y de felicidad también, bueno, de igualdad, no de desigualdad en este caso sería. Y por lo tanto yo creo que tendríamos que pasar a un discurso que podemos llamar de poscrecimiento, abandonar totalmente, como no hace la Unión Europea, que todo su discurso ambiental está ligado a la idea de disminuyamos los impactos ambientales, pero con la restricción de que sigamos creciendo. De hecho, los ejemplos que ponía María Luisa de crear más comunidad, de atacar la pobreza, etcétera, de crear también, incluso salía culturas diferentes, de menos consumistas, poco tienen que ver con el crecimiento, digamos, ¿no? O sea, no estoy abogando por el decrecimiento del Producto Interior Bruto ni por su crecimiento, sino simplemente por abandonarlo, como la Unión Europea, por ejemplo, sigue atrapada en su discurso y por esto, como se decía también en la introducción, habla mucho más de competitividad, etcétera, que no de sostenibilidad. Hace falta un cambio cultural y de orientación política. Y esto es lo que yo creo que conecta con las dos patas, de decir, no solo pensemos en cuestiones tecnológicas, que son importantísimas, sino también en cuestiones sociales, de cambio social. Y unos cambios sociales, bueno, yo que soy como economista, es dejar de pensar como pensamos normalmente la mayoría de los economistas, como enseñamos a las facultades y cómo se debate en el Parlamento cuando se habla de economía. ¿Qué pasa con el Producto Interior Bruto? Ya sé que hay una atracción por un indicador único, porque es más fácil decir, ¿no? Pero si este único es un mal indicador, mejor abandonarlo totalmente y poner otras cosas, esperanza de vida, nivel de pobreza, grado de satisfacción, de felicidad en las encuestas. Hay muchos indicadores sociales y creo que hemos de funcionar con esta complejidad, que no podemos reducir todo en un indicador, ni crecimiento, ni PIB per cápita tampoco, como siempre habitualmente se hace.
Bueno, me toca romper el hielo, ¿eh? Claro, yo no soy economista, es muy difícil responder a la pregunta. Lo que sí digo es que, como he comentado antes, al final el despliegue tecnológico en el ámbito de la energía requiere una inversión brutal. Y si creemos que la solución está en las nuevas tecnologías, evidentemente habrá que invertir en ellas. Aquí, claro, la pregunta yo creo es quién debe invertir, que está también bastante relacionado, creo, con lo que dices, ¿no? Al final, el sector privado no va a invertir si no hay oportunidad de crecimiento. Al menos esos son los estándares en los que yo tengo discusiones con las empresas que tienen que realizar escalados de tecnología o implementarla, pues un Repsol, un Naturgy o cualquiera de estas empresas, ¿no? Claro, el sector público seguramente tiene que tener otra perspectiva, ¿no? Quizás más parecida a la que estabas proponiendo, ¿no? Pero claro, no sé si en su conjunto necesitamos crecer para poder acometer estas inversiones. Lo dejo ahí. No lo sé. Pero bueno, por supuesto yo creo que aquí es un debate entre economistas, ¿no? Lo que significa tener como indicador el PIB, ¿no? El crecimiento del PIB. Yo sinceramente no lo sé.
Sí, yo tampoco, pero, que la idea que el PIB está relacionado con el bienestar es verdad más para unos países que para otros, y dentro de los países eso no es tan simple así. Son indicadores que, poniendo todo junto, después la dispersión se pierde. Sí, no es la única manera de mirar la evolución de las sociedades, creo. Pero al mismo tiempo los gráficos que Pep mostró al inicio es una manera de desmentir lo que decían que solo puede haber desarrollo económico si hubiera más emisiones. Eso es claro, que conseguimos invertir esa tendencia. Mida lo que mide el GDP, la tendencia es diferente en los últimos años y eso es una cosa que hace que pensar.
Claro, pero es verdad que sucede en países ricos, ¿no? Claro, eso también da que pensar.
Sí, claro.
Da que pensar.
No en todos, en
Exacto.
Estados Unidos no.
Exacto.
¿Ya está? Gracias a tots i a totes.
Déjame, I was just going to bring the fact that there's a long list of countries which are kind of waiting to get into this elite group of people led by the rich countries. And you'll be amazed about the countries that are lining up. Countries like in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, or South Africa, countries that you would have not thought about. Pakistan is the country that has grown solar energy faster than any other country. The world has not even understood it or realized. They were not in the statistics because it didn't go through the national grids. People have been installing like there is not tomorrow solar in the roofs because the national grid is so unreliable that they taken things on their own hand. And it was not until people start looking at the trade of PV panels between China and Pakistan that people understood that the solar panels didn't go through the national grid, that they were just going straight into people's houses. So I'm not really contributing anything about the discussion about GDP, and that's a social discussion about how we want to measure our well-being. I'm coming from climate, and we were with those kind of figures. We're just trying to demonstrate that we can decarbonize, and if the goal is to continue to grow, you still can do it. And in fact, you can do it better ultimately because the electricity from solar, will be cheap, is cheaper already, and will become even cheaper in the future as some of the battery technology becomes even cheaper and cheaper, as it's already doing every year. So anyway, this is a different contribution that I'm making, not to how to measure well-being. And again, it's certainly a different discussion with a broader community above and beyond those interested in climate or sustainability in general.
Perfecto. Gracias, Pep. Thank you so much. Gracias a tots i a totes.